Yo, what's good? Welcome back to Next Gen Amolytics. Today I'll be covering Week 10 of the NFL. I'll give you guys a few player props. I don't have any anytime touchdown scores that I like on this week, so I'll give you the four player props, that I have on today. Let's get into it. Starting out here, I like Amon St. of Detroit going against this Washington secondary. We just attacked them last week with Jaxon. He had 8 for 129 against them. They have been a funnel, on the receiving yards and receptions wise. I like both Amon's receptions and his receiving yards. I have his floor receptions at 6 with a ceiling of 7, and then I have his receiving yards at a floor of 60 with a ceiling of 70. I normally attack his receptions only. However, I like his receiving yards this week, given that Washington is a funnel and that his air yards have picked up these last two games. He had 119 air yards against Minnesota, then 94 against Tampa Bay, resulting in 86 receiving yards against Tampa Bay and 97 against Minnesota. Receptions wise, it's, as I said, it's always there. I'll list the last couple games. For example, he had 9 against Minnesota, 6 against Tampa Bay, 9 against Kansas City, 8 against Cincy. He's covered this 6 reception line in all but one game this year, and the 7 reception game in all but one game this year. So love that. Also, Washington has given up yards after the catch. The last 3 games, JSN had 47 after the catch. Rashid Rice had 56. Lamb had 60. So I like both these spots for St. Brown on this week. Next up here, I have JSN's receiving yards against his Arizona defense. I have him at a floor of 70-plus receiving yards and a ceiling of 80-plus. I have his ceiling a bit lower this week, given that Arizona is pretty good at limiting yards after the catch. When he faced them in Week 4, he had 4 receptions for 79 yards and only 8 yards after the catch. However, they are giving up air yards, as I like. They're giving up at least 4 receivers had 120-plus air yards against them. He's leading the league in air yards. Against them in Week 4, he only had 78. I will note that. However, these past couple of weeks, he had 94 against Washington, 167 against Houston, 176 against Jacksonville, and then 106 against Tampa Bay. He also is leading the league, I believe, in catch rate with passes over 30-plus yards. So I like this for him to get those in chunks. I don't think he's going to get it after the catch, but he is getting yards after the catch. He had 47 against Washington, 30 against Houston, 35 against Jacksonville. That was his least yardage after catch on this year against Arizona. So they did a decent job limiting him, but as I mentioned, he still had 4 for 79, and that's why I have his ceiling a bit lower this week. But at home against a divisional opponent, I still like him to do his thing here. And then lastly here, I like Dalton Kincaid of Buffalo receiving yards against this Miami defense. I have him at a floor of 30-plus and a ceiling of 50-plus. Miami's been getting killed by tight ends all year. All but one tight end on this year has had at least 35-plus receiving yards against them. I am focusing that on the tight end with the most targets in that game. However, as I mentioned, only one, being Trimble of Carolina, had less than 35 against them. I do have Kincaid's floor a bit lower because of his snap share at time. He's sometimes around like 55-60% of the snaps. So I believe that his floor can be, lower there. However, the ceiling is there when they've allowed, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They've allowed 6 tight ends to have 50-plus receiving yards, and some of those going into the 60s and 70s there. So it's there. And then he also faced them in Week 3 when he had 5 receptions and 66 yards against them with 43 yards after the catch. So I expect some of the same there. He's honestly Josh Allen's best receiving option on that team. However, those are the spots that I like on this week. I do put the bets that I'm placing on my IG at Next Gen Amolytics, so you can check those out there. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Let's go.